so like I said, or maybe I didn't, I'm going to be making pork chops and apple and onions with mashed sweet potatoes. And so I'm cutting these onions just across like this to kind of, this is going to be kind of a similar size and shape to what how I'm going to cut the apples. Okay, just gonna put these in here, get them ready for later. All right, I'm going to chop up the apples. Typically, if I were making something that uses apples, I usually wouldn't cut them up very early, but since these are going to be cooked down anyway, I'm not too worried about it. And I'm going to add a little bit of apple cider vinegar, kind of to serve in the place of lemon juice. Sometimes you hear that to do. I'm just going to add these in with the onions because they'll all be cooked together later. So I'm going to put a little apple cider vinegar in here with the onions and apples to kind of prevent the apples from browning, just from exposure to the air. Alright, so let me get these all chopped up real quick. Alright, so I don't think I mentioned, these are Golden Delicious apples. I used one for each pork chop. I had 4 pork chops, so I'm using 4 apples. And then the onion was a red onion, just one. I want it to be mostly a sauce with apples in it, but a little red onion in there too. So now I'm going to add a little bit of apple cider vinegar so these don't brown up too quickly before I actually cook them. And I'm just going to pour a little bit in here. Don't want to do a ton. That was actually probably a little much, but that's okay. So then I'll just toss those around. And then I'm going to saran these and stick them in the fridge, so that'll also keep them nice and pretty for a while. Alright, so now we're going to prep the sweet potatoes real quick. That will take about a minute. And while I'm cleaning these, I'm going to go ahead and get the oven preheating to 375. Alright, so now that those are clean, I'm just going to trim the ends off a little bit. And again, I've got the oven preheated at 375. So these are going to roast for about 40 minutes to an hour. Alright, so those are trimmed up. I'm going to go ahead and cut them in half to hopefully speed along the cooking process at least a little bit. Alright, so let's take these over to our baking pan. After we spray it with non-stick cooking spray. Alright, we're just going to add a little bit of olive oil, or vegetable oil works too. Just going to drizzle a little bit, if it'll drizzle. There we go. On there, and then I'm going to distribute the oil with my hands. Let's go ahead and add a little salt too. It's probably a teaspoon or so of salt, 2 teaspoons or something. Just a little bit. Kind of season the potatoes. Alright, let's get those in the oven. Now this is a citrus and onion marinade that I got to just kind of speed things along, so make things a little easier. So So what we're gonna marinate the pork in, we're gonna marinate it for about an hour at least. That's what the bottle says. And if you get a soy sauce based sauce or marinade, probably won't be as long because it's so salty. So just read your label. And I'm gonna reserve some of this for later, for when I deglaze the pan. Let's go ahead and get some of that in there. It smells pretty good. It smells citrusy and oniony, if you can believe it. All right, just gonna put our boneless pork chops in here. These are really easy to cook and deal with. Pour the rest of that in there. Now when you're marinating meat, or at least when I am, I prefer to get it kind of on the bottom shelf away from most other things, just, you know, just to be safe. So we're gonna let that go in there for an hour or more until we need it. Sounds like we need to check on our sweet potatoes, see how they're doing in there. Looking pretty good. Obviously they're not done. They've only been in there for about 30 minutes. And since it's been about 30 minutes, let's also check on the pork. And by check on the pork, I just mean flip it around. All right. I want to get it marinated evenly. Okay, and then we'll come back in about 30 more minutes. All right, guys, we're about to start our pork. And go ahead and get this cast iron skillet preheating a little bit on medium heat, or medium high heat, really. Go ahead and get the apples out as well. Okay, so we got our pork out of the fridge. It marinated for about an hour. We got our cast iron skillet preheating. Should be ready in a few minutes. First, we're going to take the pork chops and we're going to pat them dry, because otherwise we're not going to get a good sear on our pork chops. And then once they're patted dry, I'm going to give them season them with a little bit of salt, not much at all, because we've already marinated them. So they should be plenty salty. And now this leftover marinade is going to have to be discarded because it's got raw pork in it, unless we were going to use it to make a sauce and heat it up. But otherwise, just go ahead and toss it out. Get this out of the way. Alright, so I'm going to add a little salt to these pork chops on one side and a little pepper. Now our pan's pretty hot. We're going to add a little bit of oil. Let that coat the bottom. You don't want to preheat the pan for too long or start smoking. And when it does start to smoke, you know it's probably ready, if it gets to that point. So let's go ahead and get these in there. And actually, let me turn the pan up to not all the way high, but pretty high, because we want to sear these really quickly, get a really good brown on them without overcooking the insides. We're going to add these pork chops back into the sauce that we make with the apples and onions. Alright, let's add them in. While these sear, I'm actually going to step back a little bit to prevent my camera from getting splattered. All right, now we're gonna deglaze the pan with some water. Just a little bit. And some of that marinade that we reserved. And we want to scrape the brown bits from when we just cooked the pork chops. I'm going to scrape all that up into this liquid. And we're on about a medium-high heat here, not too high, just a little above medium. All right, so we're going to let this reduce for a minute. All right, so this is reduced for about a minute or two on medium-high heat. We're going to add our tablespoon of butter. All right, so yeah, let's turn it back up to a medium-high heat. Then we're going to add these apples in. Let these cook down. That's actually pretty full. So this is going to take a minute probably to cook down. Probably almost 10 minutes or more. And just a little bit more water. Alright, so it's been about 5 more minutes. My sweet potato timer went off for an hour. I decided to cover the apples and onions with a lid. Hopefully they'll sweat down more quickly that way. Alright, we'll see how they're doing. Oh, they're looking pretty done. Oh, they're very tender. Alright, so I'm just going to put these back in here and turn the oven down to warm so they stay warm, obviously, and not worry about them until the pork chops and apples and onions are ready. Alright everybody, it's been a couple more minutes. The apples are looking like they're pretty close to being done. Let me just show you real quick. So what I'm going to do, since we didn't cook those pork chops too long at all, they probably need a few more minutes of cooking. I'm going to nestle them into the apples and onions. So let's do that real quick. And these apples and onions are still on medium heat. They've been going that way for almost 10 minutes now. Alright, and the last one. Cover it up with apples and onions. And actually, let's pour some of this remaining pork juice in there from the pork chops resting. It's a little more flavor. And then I'm going to cover it and just wait a couple more minutes. And while those are finishing up, I'm going to turn the oven off and get the sweet potatoes out, because they're pretty much ready to go and they'll still be warm when we get to them. Okay, so our pork chops have been heating up again in here with the apples and onions, and they're about ready to go. And once I added the pork chops, I turned the heat down to about a medium low. So now I'm gonna get the sweet potatoes on the plate. And I decided just to bake them and not mash them. If you wanted to mash them, you certainly could. Then let's get one of these pork chops out of here. Then top it with some of these apples and onions. And there you go. That's pork chops with apples, sauteed apples and onions, and roasted sweet potatoes. See you next time on First Person Chef.